All right, let's dive into a pretty epic story, a 400-year timeline of the U.S. economy. We're going to explore the key moments and the huge policy decisions that took America from just a handful of colonies and turned it into the global powerhouse it is today. So let's get right to it.
The one thing you've got to understand from the get-go is that the U.S. economy has always been built on capitalism. As you see here, that basically means businesses are owned by people, not by the government. It gives companies the freedom to create and sell, and it gives all of us, the freedom to choose what we buy.
So here's the big question we're cackling. How did this system go from a few scattered colonies to, well, this? This isn't just a story about money, it's a story of innovation, huge conflicts, crushing crises, and some incredible reinvention. Let's start at the very beginning.
Okay, our first stop is the colonial era. This was a time way before the United States was even a single country, let alone a single unified economy.
This slide really shows you just how disconnected everything was. It was like a patchwork quilt. You had two completely different economies bubbling up. Up in New England, the rocky soil meant they focused on timber, ships, and fishing. Meanwhile, down south, the rich land was perfect for cash crops like cotton and tobacco, an entire economy built on a horrific foundation of exploited slave labor. And both of them, totally dependent on Britain for finished goods.
So, the Revolutionary War happens, and it brings political unity, which is great. But economically, it was a disaster. All that trade with Britain just stopped, and the brand new nation was left with a mountain of war debt. So, they were finally united, but they were also flat broke.
And this is where a truly pivotal figure steps onto the stage. Alexander Hamilton. This guy had the vision to create a real national financial system. He had this idea to combine all the states' debts under the federal government and start a national bank. This built the country's credit literally from nothing. Now, this was a hugely controversial idea. It pitted his vision for a strong central economy against others who wanted a more farm-based, decentralized country. But in the end, Hamilton's vision won, and it laid the financial bedrock for everything that came next.
So when you look at this timeline, you see those crucial first steps, right? The revolution brings everyone together. The central bank builds credit, and then boom! The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubles the size of the country and opens up all these vital new trade routes.
Now, let's fast forward into the 1800s, because those foundations we just talked about, well, they're about to support a completely new kind of economy. We are officially entering the age of the factory.
I mean, just look at this comparison. It shows what a massive shift this was. The economy did a total 180. It went from being all about farms and skilled craftsmen to being dominated by giant factories with machines and mass production. This was the Industrial Revolution, and it completely changed how Americans lived and worked.
This industrial boom created some staggering fortunes. I mean, wealth on a scale nobody had ever seen before. Guys like John D. Rockefeller amassed incredible power, building these enormous business empires. They called them trusts that controlled entire industries.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 90%. By 1879, a single company, Rockefeller's Standard Oil, controlled 90% of all oil production in the US. That's not just a big company, that's a monopoly. And it started to raise some serious questions about fairness and competition. So, for the first time, the government decided to step in. It started to seriously regulate the market by creating what we call antitrust laws. You can just think of antitrust as anti-monopoly. These were laws specifically designed to break up giant corporations like Standard Oil so that other businesses could have a fair shot. This was a huge policy shift, and it set up a whole new role for the government as a kind of referee in the economy.
But this era of explosive growth, well, it was about to come to a sudden and absolutely catastrophic end, leading to the single greatest economic crisis in the nation's history.
So after the incredible prosperity of the Roaring '20s, which was really fueled by a ton of speculation and borrowed money, the party came to a dead stop. The stock market crash of 1929 was the spark that lit the fuse for a whole decade of economic devastation.
The fallout was just staggering. At its worst, the unemployment rate hit 25%. That means 1 in every 4 workers in the entire country was jobless, and there was no safety net to catch them.
The nation's industrial engine just ground to a halt. I mean, production was cut in half. The very factories that had powered the country's growth just went silent.
And this wasn't just happening in the US. International trade collapsed by almost a third. It was obvious the Great Depression was a total global system failure.
In response, the government's role in the economy had to expand like never before. Under President Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal created jobs by funding huge infrastructure projects, and at the same time, the creation of Social Security established the very first federal safety net for Americans. This was a permanent change in how the government was involved in the economy.
Now, the crisis of the Depression would eventually be ended by another global conflict, one that in turn launched an era of prosperity that nobody could have imagined.
You know, it's a strange thing to think about, but the massive production needed for World War II was like a shot of adrenaline straight to the heart of the economy. Factories roared back to life, unemployment basically disappeared, and the country was put back to work on a scale we'd never seen before.
And what followed the war was nothing short of an economic golden age. You had programs like the GI Bill, empowering a whole generation of returning soldiers with education and housing, which created this huge, prosperous middle class. At the same time, amazing new technologies in cars, planes, and even computers opened up entirely new industries, fueling decades of growth. And it was this long period of post-war strength that really cemented the United States' position as the world's dominant economic superpower.
So there you have it. When you look at the whole timeline, you can see the journey. 400 years from scattered farm colonies to an industrial titan, through the absolute depths of a depression and into a post-war boom that built the global power we know today. Every single era we've talked about was defined by a massive shift in how the economy works. So now, living in an age of artificial intelligence, climate change, and this incredible global connectivity, it leaves us with a really big question to think about. What is the next great economic transformation going to be?